Hey all, Carpetbagger here, coming to you live from the Hollywood Boulevard here in Hollywood, California, and I'm currently in front of the Museum of Death. Now, I'm not going to be able to show you inside. That is, they strictly do not allow photography or videotaping of any kind. But I figured I will go in there, I will observe the Museum of Death, and I will let you guys know what I think of it. I have been to the Museum of Death's sister store in, not store, but museum in Louisiana. It's pretty interesting, very, very graphic. A lot of like crime scene photos and disturbing materials. So maybe it's good that I'm not showing you this because this would not be appropriate for the children. The one item that they did have that was kind of interesting was they had Dr. Kevorkian's death machine at the store in New Orleans. I'm not sure what sort of artifacts lie within here, but I'll let you know in just a second. Follow me. Well, the Museum of Death. I think I can safely say the Los Angeles branch of the Museum of Death is by far the most disturbing attraction that I have been to anywhere in the country. I can't think of, I think the Mutter Museum is what I used to say was the most disturbing. But yeah, Museum of Death, I think the new champion in my mind. So where do we even start? First of all, probably if I was allowed to film, there's probably not a lot that I could film without getting demonetized here on YouTube. There is quite a collection there. It's much larger than the Louisiana version. The building looks tiny, but it's actually fairly big exhibit in there. So let me just, sorry, it got me a little rattled. Honestly got me a little rattled. But they have, let me just start with possibly the most impressive artifact they had in there. And I am not joking. They had a quilt, a Manson family quilt, hand sewn as a group project by the Manson family. The Manson quilt. The National Quilt Museum apparently has nothing on the Museum of Death. Now then, so what to expect when you go into the Museum of Death? Lots of gory, horrible photographs. It's like stepping inside of rotten.com. And if you don't know what rotten.com is, please don't go to rotten.com. It is a website that was started in the 90s. It was kind of an exercise in First Amendment rights and in free speech. It was basically just a log of disturbing images, disturbing imagery, murder photos, just horrible injuries, dead bodies, that sort of thing. And that's what you'll see a lot in there. The walls are just plastered in crime scene photos. I mean, we're talking beheadings, gunshots. They have an entire hallway that's dedicated to photos of suicide victims. Jeez. So let me kind of run you room by room so I can kind of sort it in my brain. First you go in, they have a serial killer art gallery. This is art from serial killers. It seems like a lot of serial killers make art. I don't know, is it just because they have a lot of time in prison so they need to do something? Like almost a whole wall of Gacy art, which is very popular. Gacy is a very prolific artist, much like he was a very prolific serial killer. He also had a pair of the clown shoes, a pair of handcuffs that Gacy used, Gacy owned, and presumably this pair of handcuffs owned by Gacy, you would have to assume was used in graphic assault and murder by Gacy himself. Horrible to even think about, to look at something that could have been used in that. Okay, so you got the serial killer art section. You move into a room about executions. They have the Nebraska State electric chair. See, nothing more haunting than looking at an electric chair, just thinking about all the lives that have ended in that very seat. Oh my goodness. They also had an outfit worn by a convict that was killed in not that electric chair, but it was killed in the electric chair in Angola, and Angola prison in Louisiana, and it was like an execution gone wrong, and I'll spare you any further details of that, but they have the suit just sitting there or hanging there on the wall, this soiled, botched execution outfit. As far as like serial killer relics, they probably have what could be considered the ultimate serial killer relic. They have the preserved head of Henry Landreau, known as the Bluebeard of Paris, was a terrible serial killer around the early 1900s. Was brutal. Don't look this up. Anything I'm saying, don't look up, because you don't need to know anymore. You don't want to know anymore. But they have his freaking head there. His freaking head. The head of a serial killer. Now, yeah, head of a serial killer. And okay, so where were we? We were in the execution room. Yeah, his head was cut off with a guillotine in France, and somehow wound up here in Hollywood at the Museum of Death. So from the funeral area, you move into the giant exhibit on autopsies and funeral sciences. I actually had a TV playing an instructional video of how to do autopsies. And when I say instructional, I mean it was using a real dead body. You could look up with your eyes and see a dead body being, can't even think of the word. Whatever like a mortician does to a body, that's what they were doing to the body. A dead body being sewn up on an autopsy. Was I thinking autopsy? I don't know. It was horrible. It was traumatizing, and I'll never be able to forget it. Moving on. What else was in the Museum of Death? They had exhibit on the Heaven's Gate cult, like a setup where you could kind of see what it looked like when they committed suicide, with the sneakers and the blanket covering them, and then I think they had a pair of glasses from someone in the cult. They had a special California room where they had a lot of, that's where they had the Manson family quilt. Had a really creepy wax figure of Manson. Couldn't forget that. And oh my gosh, Black Dahlia stuff. If you don't know what the Black Dahlia is, don't look it up. Freaking the most horrible murder ever. Okay, I do want to call a little bit of BS on the Museum of Death here. When you go in, they explain that you can't take photos, and their reason is these are real things. These are real items. We want to have respect for the dead. And I don't know, what is respect for the dead? They had just photos of brutal murders, of crime scene photos, murder photos, photos of murderers, of their victims. Just terrible. So I have a hard time buying the respect for the dead excuse. How about just saying we don't want you taking photos because we don't want people on the internet to see this stuff. And okay, they had a form for a Black Dahlia look-alike contest where people dress up like the famous murder victim. They even have like a category for best crime scene reenactment. I don't know. That doesn't seem very respectful. Anyways, where were we? They did have some animal remains. They had like a bone room with a giraffe skull, an elephant skull. Probably the most interesting, one of the most interesting things to me is they had a lot of taxidermy dogs. Like, you know, it's California. I think a lot of wealthy people love their animals. There's like a lot of like toy dogs, like little toy dogs, taxidermy. So I guess, you know, people love their animals, and people that have money, that can afford to have such things done, have their animals preserved taxidermically so they can have them forever. And I guess eventually when that person dies, and it gets passed on, people don't necessarily want to keep a taxidermied Pomeranian, so they wind up in the Museum of Death. And they actually had some, you know, one of my favorite things is celebrity taxidermied animals. You know, animals that did amazing things or were famous that you can actually visit to this day. Two in there. They had Liberace's cat. Liberace's cat is taxidermy. That's kind of worth the price of admission to see Liberace's taxidermy cat in there. And in addition, they had one of Jane Mansfield's taxidermy chihuahuas, and the chihuahua actually died in the infamous, horrific car accident that took Jane Mansfield's life. And wow, and actually both Liberace's cat and Jane Mansfield's dogs, the taxidermied animals, belong to Anton LaVey, the head of the Church of Satan. And he, I guess Anton LaVey, I don't know if he donated it himself or his family donated it to the museum, but their animals belonged to Anton LaVey. People got mad at me in a different video because I mentioned that Jane Mansfield was a Satanist. If she wasn't a Satanist, why did she leave her dogs in her will to Anton LaVey? I'm trying to think what else they have. Yeah, they had someone's pet pig, like a giant pot-bellied pig that was taxidermied. They had a taxidermied iguana. A lot of taxidermy pets, which I find that interesting. You know, that's fascinating to me. They had the clothes that Gigi Allen died in. And if you don't know who Gigi Allen is, don't look it up, because he's like the most graphic performance artist of all time. He was a musician, a punk rock musician that did horrifying things to himself while he performed, and they had his autograph written in his own blood hanging on the wall next to the clothes that he died in. I think I've covered most of what they have. Again, a lot of the exhibits are more documents, photos, sometimes like small things like a soil sample or a piece of a building, and a lot of paperwork, letters from serial killers, mail, that sort of thing. They had a collection of body bags hanging on the wall. I'm just slowly remembering just horrible, horrible things. Just kind of analyzing this as a museum. What is the significance of the museum? What is this museum teaching? I noticed there was a lot of young people in there, a lot of people probably in their early 20s. It's a very busy museum. There's a lot of people in there. It was very crowded, very hard to see the exhibits. There's so many people in there. I noticed a lot of like laughing and smiling, and I don't want to be judgmental. I think maybe that could be nervousness, seeing something that's very uncomfortable. I think some people respond with giggles and laughter. I've probably smiled in this video out of I'm doing it right now, out of being uncomfortable, out of seeing something, ooh, that blows you away, just in that sort of guttural thing. You can't deny this place will give you a guttural reaction. You will be punched. It's a punch in the gut. A punch in the gut is the best way to describe this museum. I would say that, you know, you have to consider the fact is putting pictures of dead bodies, people that are murdered, putting those pictures up on the wall, is that respectful? I don't know. The people obviously cannot consent to have that done. Yeah, I think what is gained by people seeing that, maybe respect for the death, respect for the seriousness and graveness of death, maybe is value. You know, there's much to be learned about our society by looking at the absolute most most desperate and horrific things that happened. So that was my summary of the Museum of Death. If anything upsets you, if you have the slightest bit of squeamishness in you, if you get queasy with anything, don't come here. This is top level. This is top level disturbing. I've seen things in there that I will never forget, things that I will bring to my grave with me that I wish I hadn't have looked at. So, and they do warn you that. They do tell you this is gonna be grisly, this is gonna be real. Just know that before you purchase a ticket and go in. So yeah, I'd love to hear some feedback on what you guys think of the Museum of Death. If anyone has been here, their opinions. If you want comments on the value of a museum like this. Do you agree? Do you not agree with some of the exhibits, some of the displaying of very graphic material? I'm trying to remember anything I missed mentioning in there. I don't think so. I don't think so. Ask me later. Maybe I'll remember something. Super disturbing. 5 dead thumbs up, I guess. I don't know. I don't have a rating system. Appreciate you guys watching. To see other horrifying things that I've seen, check down in the description. The interactive map that'll show you where I've been. You can make suggestions on where I need to go next. If you'd like to help support the channel, consider buying a t-shirt. Consider a donation to Patreon. I send people that donate $3 or more a postcard once a month. But for now, this one's in the body bag.